Hey folks, before the video starts, please leave a like and subscribe to cheer me up. Make sure you are relaxed and enjoy today's stories. I ordered a killer clown of the dark web. He had a towel on his face. I wish I never took it off. Alright, so before I start, I just want to say, don't judge me too hard for what I'm about to tell you. Looking back, I can't believe I actually went through with it. But at the time, it felt like a joke, a weird prank, something that couldn't possibly be real. I was just another guy scrolling Reddit at 2 a.m., bored out of my mind. You know how it goes. One thread leads to another, and suddenly, I'm deep diving into conspiracy theories about the deep web. I've heard about the deep web before. Hell, everyone has, right? The secret corner of the internet where people do illegal things, buy stolen goods, hire hitmen, whatever. It's all just urban legend stuff. At least that's what I thought. That night, I came across this thread titled, "Dark Web Challenges You Should Never Try." Of course, I clicked it. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Most of the comments were about harmless dares, stuff like ordering haunted items or paying for fake ghost sightings on live streams. But one comment stood out. It was from a user named Nightmare Courier, and it said something like, "If you're feeling brave, check out this service. They'll send you a clown, but not just any clown, a killer clown. Just don't mess with what's under the towel." Now, I'm not a fan of clowns. Never have been. But something about this felt different. Maybe it was the way the comment was worded, or the fact that so many people had liked it, but my curiosity spiked. The idea of ordering a killer clown sounded ridiculous, yet the way the comment talked about it, I don't know. It felt real. Like this wasn't just another creepy doll or whatever. It had this vibe of something you shouldn't mess with. But me, I wanted to prove it was fake. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? Some guy shows up in a bad clown costume, and I get a good laugh. So, I followed the link. The website itself was pretty sketchy. It had a weird black and red theme, with flashing pop-ups warning that I should turn back now. Real corny stuff. I almost clicked out, but then I saw the banner at the top that said, "Exclusive orders, last chance this month." And right under it was a single option. Killer clown delivery, face covered, $150. No joke, there was a big disclaimer about the face. Apparently, the clown would arrive with a towel over its face, and you were not supposed to remove it. I assumed this was part of the shtick, some creepy mystery they were building around this whole clown thing. I was already thinking about how I'd tell my friends about this hilarious prank when it was all over. I'll admit, I hesitated for a second. I mean, $150 isn't pocket change, especially for a joke. But the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to see how far they'd take this. Plus, I had a little extra cash saved up, so I figured, why not? The checkout process was disturbingly easy. After entering my details and paying through Bitcoin, I received an email almost immediately. "Your killer clown is on the way. ETA, 3 to 5 days. Do not remove the towel. You've been warned." It felt surreal. Like I had just done something really dumb, but it hadn't hit me yet. Honestly, I expected them to just take my money and disappear, and I was fine with that. I'd laugh about it later with my friends. 3 days passed, and I kind of forgot about the whole thing. No tracking info, no follow-up emails. I assumed it was a scam until I got home on the 4th day. There was a package at my door. No label, no return address, nothing. just a plain, beat-up cardboard box. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out if this was some kind of mistake. But deep down, I knew what it was. My killer clown. And that's when I started feeling the first twinge of real fear. I stood there, just staring at the box on my porch. It wasn't huge, maybe the size of a person's torso, but it looked heavy. There were dents along the sides, like it had been kicked around or dropped a few times. I don't know why, but my hands were sweating as I reached down to pick it up. There was something off about it, something that made me hesitate for a moment. The weight of the box felt wrong in my hands, like it was shifting slightly inside, almost like something was alive. I carried it inside and dropped it on my kitchen table. For a while, I just stood there, looking at it. My rational brain was telling me that this was all part of the gimmick. Maybe they put in a mannequin or some kind of animatronic thing to mess with me. But something in my gut was telling me that this wasn't going to be funny. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. I grabbed a knife and carefully sliced through the tape. The sound of the blade cutting through the cardboard echoed in the quiet of my house. As soon as the box opened, this horrible smell hit me, like rotting meat and something metallic, almost like blood. I gagged and stepped back, covering my nose with my sleeve. My hand started shaking, but I forced myself to keep going. I had to see what was inside. Pulling back the flaps of the box, I saw it. The clown. At first, it didn't look too bad. He was sitting in there, hunched over, with his knees pulled up to his chest. His outfit was the typical clown getup. Big polka dots, frilly collar, oversized shoes, but it wasn't colorful. Everything was this sickly, washed-out gray, like the fabric had been soaked in something. The worst part, his face was covered, just like they said. A dirty white towel wrapped tightly around his head, knotted in the back. He wasn't moving. For a solid minute, I stood there, expecting him to spring up, say something, do something, but he just sat there, motionless. Okay, I thought, it's just a prop. Some creepy dude in a basement probably stuffed a mannequin in a box, covered it in some nasty smelling liquid, and called it a day. I was about to laugh it off when I noticed something I hadn't before. The chest was rising and falling, barely, but enough that I could see it. This clown was breathing. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. I almost dropped the knife I was holding, gripping it tighter as I backed up to the far side of the room. My mind was racing. This was no joke, no stupid prank. There was a person, no, a thing, alive in that box. Before I could think any more, the clown shifted slightly, his head turning towards me. It was subtle, but enough to make my stomach twist into knots. He didn't make a sound, didn't even try to get up. He just sat there, breathing under that towel. And I don't know why, but it was the towel that scared me the most. The way it clung to his face, covering everything. I couldn't stop staring at it. There was a pounding in my head, and I suddenly realized I was still holding my breath. Why was this happening? Who would send me this? What was I supposed to do now? For the next few minutes, I paced around my kitchen, glancing at the clown every now and then. He hadn't moved again, but I could still hear the faint sound of his breathing, shallow, almost like he was asleep. I thought about calling the police, but what was I going to tell them? Hey, I ordered a killer clown off the dark web, and now he's sitting in a box in my kitchen. Yeah, that wasn't going to go over well. Then I remembered the towel. Do not remove the towel. The warning from the website flashed in my mind, and I tried to shake it off. This was all part of the game, right? The towel was probably some weird mask they put on him, something to make him look scarier. But the longer I stared at it, the more I felt this overwhelming urge to take it off. I know, dumbest idea ever. But it was like my brain wasn't even in control anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about what was underneath. Maybe if I saw his face, I'd understand what this was all about. Maybe it would prove this was just some messed up prank. My hand trembled as I reached for the towel. The closer I got, the more the smell from the box seemed to intensify. This foul, decaying odor that made my head spin. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and fast, like a drum. The moment I touched the towel, I felt a pulse, like an electric shock, not just in my fingers, but through my whole body. The clown's breathing stopped. I froze. Then, suddenly, I heard a whisper. It wasn't from the clown, though. It came from behind me, soft but clear, like someone standing right at my ear. Don't! I spun around, but no one was there. Just my empty kitchen, silent except for the faint sound of the wind outside. When I turned back to the clown, his head had shifted slightly, like he was leaning forward, waiting for me to finish what I'd started. I yanked my hand back. I couldn't do it. Something inside me was screaming not to touch that towel. But now, there was no turning back. I couldn't leave him here. I couldn't just go to bed and pretend like this never happened. I had to know what was under there. I grabbed the towel again, but before I could pull it off, the lights in my house flickered and went out, plunging the entire room into darkness. When the lights went out, the first thing I felt was cold, like unnatural cold, the kind that gets into your bones. The room was pitch black, and I couldn't see a thing. The air felt heavier, like the atmosphere had thickened around me. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, desperate to get any kind of light. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped it twice before the screen lit up. The weak glow from my phone barely made a dent in the darkness, but it was enough to make out the outline of the box on my kitchen table. The clown was still in there, his face still covered, his body still hunched over. But something was different now. The air felt wrong, like I wasn't alone in the room anymore. The kind of feeling you get when someone's watching you. Except there was no one there, just the clown. Or was it? My heart was pounding so loud, it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I aimed my phone's light at the clown, the tiny beam bouncing off the towel, covering his face. He hadn't moved, but the air was thick with tension, like something was about to snap. I didn't know if it was the darkness messing with my head or something worse, but I swear, I could feel the clown looking at me through the towel. Then I heard it, a rustling sound, quiet at first, but getting louder, like fabric being dragged across the floor. I spun around, shining the phone light towards the sound, but nothing was there. Just my kitchen, silent, empty. My eyes flicked back to the clown, expecting him to be standing now, but he was still sitting there, still motionless. Except now, his head was tilted just a little further towards me. I had to get out. Screw the towel. Screw the clown. This wasn't a joke anymore. I needed to leave the house, call someone, anyone, just to get away from that thing. But as soon as I took a step toward the front door, I heard the noise again. This time, it was closer. It wasn't coming from the clown, though. It was coming from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. A slow, dragging sound, like something was crawling behind the walls, slithering just out of sight. Then came the voice. It was low at first, barely a whisper, but it echoed through the darkness like it was being spoken directly into my skull. "Don't leave." I froze. The voice was deep, distorted, like someone trying to talk through a thick layer of static. And the worst part, it wasn't coming from one place. It seemed to fill the room, surrounding me, squeezing me, like invisible hands were wrapping around my throat. My phone started to flicker, the light dimming in and out as the battery drained faster than I'd ever seen. "You need to see." The voice came again, clearer this time, and suddenly I knew it was talking about the towel. My hands went cold as I realized it was inviting me to take it off. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out of there, but my feet were glued to the floor. I didn't know if it was fear or something else holding me there, but I couldn't move. My breath came out in shaky gasps, and the dragging sound grew louder, almost like it was right under my feet. The walls creaked, and in the distance, I heard something soft, like a wet squelching noise, faint but growing louder with every second. And then I felt it, a touch on my shoulder. I spun around so fast I almost tripped, my phone swinging wildly in my hand. But again, nothing, just empty air. But I knew someone or something had been there, even if I couldn't see it. My whole body was trembling now. This wasn't just fear, it was dread, that deep, sinking feeling that makes you want to crawl out of your own skin. I turned back toward the clown, and that's when I saw it. The towel had slipped, just slightly, revealing a sliver of the face underneath. At first, I thought it was just shadow, but as I brought my phone closer, I realized it wasn't. There was skin, pale, almost translucent, but wrong. The texture wasn't smooth like a person's face should be. It was cracked, split in jagged lines, like old, dried mud that had been left out in the sun for too long. And the smell. Oh God, the smell hit me again, stronger than before, like something had crawled out of a grave and sat in that box, festering. My brain was screaming at me to stop, to back away, but I couldn't. My hand moved toward the towel, almost on its own, my fingers trembling as they gripped the edge of the fabric. I was so close to pulling it all the way off when I felt another presence behind me. Not a sound this time, but a feeling, a shift in the air, like someone or something was right there, inches from my back. The hairs on my neck stood up, and my skin prickled. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't. Whatever was behind me, I knew I wasn't supposed to see it, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head, the phone light flickering weakly as I tried to shine it into the darkness. And that's when I saw it, just for a split second, a shape, barely visible in the dim light. Tall, too tall to be human, with long spindly limbs that seemed to stretch and coil in unnatural ways. Its skin was a sickly gray, like old, decayed flesh, and its eyes, oh God, its eyes, were black, endless pits, staring straight at me. And then it was gone, just like that. I blinked, shaking so hard I thought I was going to pass out. The room was empty again, but I knew it had been there. I whipped back toward the clown, my pulse hammering in my chest. The towel was still in place, but now it was soaked, dripping with something dark, something that looked too thick to be water. I stumbled back, feeling my stomach twist. The voice returned, low and guttural this time, echoing from all corners of the room. "Finish it." I stood there, completely paralyzed. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The clown sat in front of me, towel halfway off its face, leaking whatever dark, foul-smelling liquid was seeping from its body. I couldn't move, couldn't tear my eyes away from the horrifying thing I had just exposed. The voice came again, that same distorted, low murmur that seemed to come from everywhere. "You've gone too far." I could feel my heart racing, pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to get out of the house, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my eyes locked onto the figure in front of me. And then, slowly, painfully slowly, the clown started to move. Its head tilted further upward, revealing more of the mangled, grotesque thing beneath the towel. I hadn't even pulled it all the way off, but I could see enough now to make me wish I had never touched it in the first place. The skin on its face, or what was left of it, was peeling back, revealing raw, exposed muscle beneath. The jagged holes, where its eyes should have been, were leaking that same thick, black substance, and its lips were drawn back in an unnatural, twisted grin. I wanted to scream, but the sound got caught in my throat. The clown's head twitched, like it was adjusting itself, and then it slowly stood up from the box. As it rose, its joints made this sickening cracking sound, like bones grinding against each other. It was taller than I expected, almost unnaturally tall. Its body unfolded in this weird, jerky motion, like a puppet being pulled up by invisible strings. I took a step back, finally finding the strength to move, but my legs felt like jelly. The clown didn't follow me. It just stood there, swaying slightly, that horrible grin still plastered across its decayed face. And then, in the faint light from my phone, I saw something even worse. There was writing on the walls. At first, I thought it was just shadows or stains from the old paint. But no, there were words, dozens of them, scrawled across the walls of my kitchen in thick, dark streaks. They were smeared and uneven, like they'd been written in a rush, but I could still make out some of the phrases. "You were warned. Don't take it off. It sees you." My stomach churned, bile rising in the back of my throat as I realized the writing wasn't done in ink or paint. The dark substance, dripping down the walls, was the same black liquid that had been oozing from the clown's face. It had been in my house longer than I thought. I hadn't noticed it before, but now, under the glow of my phone, it was everywhere. The clown took a step toward me. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? The thing wasn't attacking, not yet, but it was moving. Slow, deliberate steps, each one dragging its oversized shoes across the floor with a sickening squeak. The sound echoed in the kitchen, bouncing off the walls, making the space feel even smaller. I backed up until I hit the counter, my hand scrambling for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers wrapped around the handle of a kitchen knife, and I gripped it tightly, my knuckles turning white. But even as I held it in front of me, I knew it wouldn't be enough. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't human. It wasn't something I could just stab and make go away. It took another step closer, its body swaying like a broken marionette, its head twitching slightly to the side, as if studying me. The grin on its face stretched even wider, splitting the skin at the corners of its mouth. Black liquid dripped from its lips, pooling on the floor beneath it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but something made me check. I pulled it out with trembling hands and glanced at the screen. It was another message from that same unknown number. "You've broken the rules. It's coming for you now." I felt my heart drop. Broken the rules? What rules? The towel? Was that it? All because I pulled back the towel? Panic surged through me as the realization hit me like a freight train. The website, the warnings, the rules, they weren't just there for show. I had crossed a line, and now, whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to stop. The clown took another step forward, now only a few feet away from me. I could smell the rot coming off it in waves, that sickly, sweet stench that made my stomach churn. I backed up further, my hand gripping the knife so tight it hurt. I didn't know what else to do. I was cornered. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. Bright, blinding white light filled the room, and for a moment, I was disoriented. But when my eyes adjusted, I saw it, clear as day. The clown was no longer in front of me. It was behind me. I spun around, my knife held out in front of me, but it was too late. The clown's hand, a cold, slimy, bone-thin hand, gripped my wrist, hard enough to make me drop the knife. I screamed, but the sound felt small, swallowed up by the oppressive silence that filled the room. The clown's face, what was left of it, was inches from mine now. I could see the gory details up close, the way the skin peeled back in ragged strips, the black liquid dripping from its hollow eye sockets. Its grin was wider than ever, stretching across its entire face, almost splitting it in two. And then, in a voice that wasn't quite human, it spoke again, its breath cold against my skin. "You shouldn't have looked. I don't know why I did it. Even now, thinking back on it, I can't explain why I reached out again. Maybe it was the voice. Maybe it was the cold, oppressive darkness pushing me toward the clown like it wanted me to finish what I'd started. Whatever it was, I felt like I had no control. My hand was shaking as I grabbed the towel again, my fingers brushing against the wet fabric. It was cold and slimy, like it had been soaking in something that had died long ago. The room felt smaller, the air so thick I could barely breathe. Every part of me screamed to stop, but my hand kept moving, pulling the towel slowly off the clown's face. My pulse was pounding in my ears, so loud I couldn't even hear myself think. The darkness pressed in closer, and I could feel something shifting around me. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, waiting, watching. With one final tug, the towel slipped off, and I saw it. I wish I hadn't. The clown's face wasn't a face at all. It was a mass of twisted, deformed flesh, like something that had been melted and reshaped into a grotesque, inhuman mask. Where there should have been eyes, there were hollow black pits, gaping holes that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. His skin, if you could even call it that, was gray and cracked, peeling in places like dried leather. And his mouth, God, the mouth, was a jagged, gaping slash, filled with teeth that looked like they didn't belong in any living thing. But it wasn't just the face that made my blood turn to ice. It was the movement. As soon as the towel hit the floor, the thing, this clown, jerked violently, like it had been waiting for the reveal. Its head snapped up toward me, and the hollow eyeless sockets locked onto mine. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was frozen in place, staring into the black void where its eyes should have been. And then, its mouth began to twist, slow at first, and then faster, stretching impossibly wide, as if it was trying to grin. The skin around the mouth split open, revealing rows of sharp, crooked teeth, each one slick with something wet and dark. It didn't make a sound, but I could feel it laughing, feel it vibrating through the air, a low, guttural rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was locked in place, my eyes glued to the grotesque figure in front of me. The clown, or whatever it was, began to stand, unfolding itself from the box in a way that didn't seem possible. Its limbs were long, too long, stretching and bending like they didn't have bones. The more it rose, the more twisted and unnatural its body became, like it was shedding the shape it had been forced into. And that's when I heard the voice again. "You should have listened." This time, it was coming from the clown, but the voice was wrong, distorted, like it was coming through a broken speaker. The words crawled under my skin, sending waves of nausea rolling through me. I wanted to run, to escape, but I was trapped, paralyzed by the sheer horror of what I was seeing. Then it lunged. 1 second, it was standing there, staring at me with that horrific grin, and the next, it was across the room, its long, spindly arms reaching for me. I stumbled back, finally finding my feet, but I wasn't fast enough. Its cold, slimy fingers wrapped around my wrist, yanking me toward it. I screamed, finally breaking free of the terror that had silenced me. But the sound felt small, swallowed up by the thick, oppressive darkness around me. It pulled me closer, and for a brief moment, I saw into it. The black pits where its eyes should have been were more than just empty sockets. They were portals, windows into something far worse. I caught a glimpse of something, a place, a writhing mass of shadows, faces, all twisted in agony, all screaming in silence. They were trapped, lost in whatever hell this thing had come from, and I knew that if I didn't get away, I would be too. With a strength I didn't know I had, I yanked my arm free and bolted toward the door. The thing, whatever it was, let out a screech, a high-pitched metallic wail that shook the walls. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I threw myself out of the house, slamming the door behind me, and ran. I don't remember how long I ran. The night air was cold, biting at my skin, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not until I was far away, far enough that I couldn't feel the weight of those eyeless pits staring into me anymore. When I finally collapsed, breathless and shaking, I looked back at my house in the distance. The lights were still out, the windows dark, but I knew it was still there, waiting. I didn't go back that night. Hell, I haven't gone back at all. I stayed with a friend for a few days, trying to explain what had happened without sounding completely insane. They didn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me either, but I knew the truth. A few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. "How was your experience? Ready for round 2? I blocked the number, but it didn't stop. The messages kept coming, the voice messages, all saying the same thing. "You saw it, didn't you? You weren't supposed to. We warned you. Now, every night, I hear something outside my window. A soft, dragging sound, just like before. I keep the lights on, keep the doors locked, but I know it's still out there. And sometimes, I think I can hear the laughter. Low, guttural, just outside my door. And I know that one day, the lights will go out again, and it will be waiting." I found a video about my brother on the deep web. No one is allowed to look at him while he is eating. I now know the horrifying reason why. So, before I dive into this, let me make one thing clear. I'm not some tech genius or a hacker. I'm just your average guy who gets curious about stuff he probably shouldn't. And that's how this whole thing started. My name's Nick, and I've always been interested in weird internet stories, especially the kind about the deep web. I mean, who isn't a little curious about the hidden parts of the internet, right? You hear about these creepy things, weird videos, unsettling content, but it's always something that happens to someone else. Anyway, I've always been a sucker for horror stories. So, one night, a few months back, I decided to check out what all the fuss was about. I knew the deep web was dangerous, but I wasn't looking to buy anything illegal or anything. I just wanted to see if those bizarre rumors about cursed videos or strange forums were true. You know, the stuff YouTubers talk about in their top 5 deep web mysteries videos. I remember that night like it was yesterday. I had just gotten off work and grabbed a 6-pack on my way home. It was one of those calm, rainy nights where you want to do nothing but chill on the couch. My little brother, Jack, was staying with me for the weekend. We hadn't spent much time together since we both grew up, and our relationship was, I don't know, kind of strained. Jack was always a bit off, even when we were kids. He had these weird habits, like being super private about his meals. He'd never let anyone watch him eat. At family dinners, he'd face the wall or ask to be excused early. We just chalked it up to a childhood quirk that never went away. So, Jack was in the guest room, and I was browsing random Reddit threads when I saw this post about accessing the deep web for the first time. I had Tor installed already. Don't ask me why. I honestly don't remember what led me to download it. Feeling a little buzzed from the beer, I thought, screw it, let's check this out. At first, it was all boring stuff. Links to sketchy marketplaces and forums with discussions that didn't really interest me. I was about to close it down when I came across this one link in a forum titled The Unseen Faces. It wasn't flashy, just a plain hyperlink that looked like it had been ignored for a while. I'm a sucker for curiosity, so of course, I clicked it. It took me to a basic site, dark background, white text, no graphics, no ads, nothing but a list of video files. They all had names like face01.mkv and face02.mkv, going up to about 50. None of them had descriptions. It was eerie, but nothing screamed danger at first. That's when I noticed one video at the very bottom, slightly out of line with the others. It was titled face43jack.mkv. I froze. Jack isn't exactly a rare name, but how often do you see it tied to something like this? I thought it was a weird coincidence, or maybe my brain was just messing with me. But the more I stared at it, the more this uncomfortable feeling spread through my chest. Something didn't feel right. I thought about Jack in the next room. I thought about all his weird habits, the strange things he did that no one else in our family seemed to talk about. I hadn't really thought about how weird it was until that moment. My heart was racing now, but I had to know. I had to click it. So, I did. The video loaded, but it took forever, like the site was old and barely functioning. The screen was black at first, and I could hear this faint, crackling sound, like an old VHS tape being played. Then the video faded in. There he was, my brother Jack, sitting at a table, eating. It was definitely him. Same haircut, same build, same nervous twitch in his left hand that I remembered from when we were kids. The camera was set up from behind, so I couldn't see his face clearly. He didn't speak. There wasn't any background noise, just Jack, sitting at this wooden table, eating something out of a bowl. But something was wrong. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but the more I watched, the stranger it got. He wasn't eating like a normal person. His movements were mechanical, like each bite was part of some rehearsed routine, robotic and slow. And the food in the bowl, at first I thought it was soup or cereal, but the longer I stared, the more it seemed off. The consistency didn't look right. It was thick, and the color wasn't anything I recognized. Kind of grayish, almost like sludge. My mouth went dry. I almost clicked out of the video, convinced this was some sort of sick prank, but I noticed something else, something that made my stomach drop. In the reflection of the bowl, distorted by the liquid, I could make out a faint shape, a face, not Jack's, but someone or something else's, hovering just above his shoulder. I blinked hard, thinking it was a trick of the light, or maybe just a glitch in the video. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. There was definitely something, someone there, and they were watching him eat. All right, I'm not gonna lie. After I saw that face in the reflection, my whole body froze, like I couldn't even move for a second. It was the kind of fear that doesn't hit you right away, but creeps up on you and sinks in deep. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what the hell I just watched. It's not every day you find a creepy video of your brother on the deep web, right? I closed the video immediately. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, the sound of my own breathing louder than anything else in the room. My brother, Jack, my actual brother, was in that video, eating something that looked wrong. And that face in the reflection, it wasn't human. I'm not even sure how to explain it. It was just off, like the features didn't sit right on the face, you know? Everything about it screamed wrong. But here's the thing. Jack was in the next room, my actual brother. He was sleeping, or at least I thought he was. So, what the hell was that video? My mind went to all kinds of places. Maybe it was a deep fake. Maybe someone was messing with me. But who would go through that much trouble? And how the hell would they even know about Jack's weird eating habits? That's when I remembered something. Growing up, my family had this unspoken rule. No one was allowed to look at Jack while he was eating. It started when he was really young, probably around 8 or 9. I never questioned it much, because as a kid, you just go along with what your parents say. But now, thinking back on it, the whole thing seemed a little too strange. Whenever we had dinner as a family, Jack would sit at the far end of the table, facing the wall. If anyone tried to sit near him, or even glance his way while he ate, my mom would quietly but firmly tell us to stop. It became normal, routine. Nobody talked about it, nobody questioned it. And Jack, he never complained. He seemed fine with it. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to know what was going on. Maybe the video was just some creepy coincidence, or maybe there was something more. My gut told me the answer was somewhere in that video, but watching it again wasn't something I wanted to do alone. I was too freaked out. So I did what any normal person would do in my situation. I went to wake Jack. I knocked on the door to the guest room, quietly at first, then a little louder when I didn't get an answer. The door creaked open slightly and the room was pitch black. I could hear his slow, steady breathing, which, honestly, was a little comforting. At least I knew he was there. I felt stupid for panicking earlier, but something still didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the uneasiness that had settled over me since I saw the video. "Jack?" I called out softly. "You awake?" No answer. I stepped inside and switched on the small lamp near the bed. Jack was lying there, curled up under the covers, his back facing me. For a split second, I thought about leaving him alone. He'd probably think I was nuts if I tried to explain why I woke him up, but I couldn't. "Hey man, I need to talk to you," I said, louder this time. He still didn't move. I walked over to the side of the bed and reached out to tap his shoulder. The second my hand touched the blanket, he bolted upright. His eyes snapped open, wide and unfocused, like he had just woken up from a nightmare. "You okay?" I asked, feeling my heart rate spike again. Jack blinked a few times and looked at me, his face pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, like he didn't know where he was. It was unsettling, to say the least. "Nick," he finally said, his voice raspy. "Yeah, man, it's me. Sorry for waking you up, but I need to ask you something. It's kind of weird." He rubbed his eyes, clearly trying to shake off the grogginess. "What time is it?" "Late," I said, shrugging. "I found something online, and I need you to take a look." He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me with this confused expression. "What did you find?" That's when I told him about the video. I didn't go into too much detail because I didn't want to freak him out right away. But I gave him the gist, how I was browsing random stuff, found a weird deep website, and stumbled across a video with his name on it. I left out the part about the face in the reflection. That felt like something I'd have to ease him into. Jack sat up straighter, running a hand through his messy hair. His eyes were darting back and forth, like he was thinking hard about something. You found a video of me?" he repeated slowly. "Yeah, dude. I swear it was you. Same haircut, same clothes. You were sitting at a table, eating." I could tell he was trying to process it, but something about his expression changed. It wasn't fear exactly, but more like recognition, like I had just said something that unlocked a memory. "Nick, you weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. Jack looked away, staring at the wall, his jaw clenched. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "There's a reason why no one's allowed to watch me eat. I thought it was just our family who knew, but I guess other people do too." That didn't make any sense. How could random people on the deep web know anything about Jack's eating habits? He turned to face me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw real fear in his eyes. "I never wanted you to find out," he said. "I tried to keep it hidden, but it's too late now." My chest tightened. I didn't understand what he was saying, but I could feel the weight of something heavy pressing down on us. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaky. Jack's eyes darted toward the door, like he was expecting someone, or something, to walk in. He lowered his voice, barely above a whisper now. "There's something that happens when people watch me eat. Something bad. It's not just a family thing. It's a rule. You're not supposed to look. Ever." I was trying to keep my cool, but every word out of his mouth was making me more and more uneasy. "What happens, Jack? What's going on?" He hesitated before answering, his face drained of all color. "I don't know how to explain it," he said slowly, "but I think you're going to find out soon." I stood there, staring at Jack, trying to process what he had just said. "You're not supposed to look." His words kept repeating in my head, over and over again, but they made no sense. What was he even talking about? This wasn't some simple childhood quirk. It was something much bigger, much darker. I wanted to push him for more answers, but I could tell by the look on his face that he was terrified. And if Jack was scared, then whatever was happening had to be serious. I mean, Jack wasn't the type to get freaked out easily. He was always the calm one, the guy who didn't flinch at scary movies or late-night horror stories. But now he looked like he was ready to bolt. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind still racing. Jack, you gotta explain this to me. I found a video of you on the deep web. You were eating, and there was something in the reflection, something watching you. What the hell is going on? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just sat there, rubbing his hands together like he was cold, even though the room wasn't. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "It's not something I can control," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not even something I understand, but it's been happening for as long as I can remember. There's a reason why no one's allowed to watch me eat. My parents knew it, and they tried to protect me from it. From them." "Them?" I asked, my stomach tightening. Jack nodded slowly. "I don't know who they are or what they are, but they show up when people break the rule, when people watch me eat." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "You mean the face in the reflection?" He didn't respond, but the look on his face was enough of an answer. I was about to ask another question when Jack stood up suddenly, his whole body tensed like he was listening for something. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I strained my ears, trying to catch whatever he was hearing. At first, there was nothing, just the distant hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. But then, I heard it, faint, almost like a low growl coming from somewhere down the hall. It was so quiet that I thought I was imagining it, but the look on Jack's face told me I wasn't. I need to eat," Jack said, his voice trembling. "It's been too long. They get angry if I don't." My heart sank. "What do you mean, they get angry? Who are they?" Jack looked at me, and for the first time, I could see real fear in his eyes. "I don't know what happens if I don't eat, but I've never let it get that far. You need to leave the room, Nick. Don't ask questions. Just don't watch." I wanted to argue, to push him for more answers, but that growling sound, it was getting louder. It was coming closer, and the air in the room felt like it was thickening, like the atmosphere itself was suffocating. I felt my stomach knot up in a way that made it hard to breathe. "Please," Jack begged. "I'm serious. You can't be here when I eat." I didn't know what to do. Every part of my brain was screaming at me to stay, to figure out what the hell was going on. But at the same time, there was this primal instinct deep inside me, telling me to run. Whatever was happening wasn't natural. It wasn't something I could rationalize. So, I left. I stepped out of the room and pulled the door closed behind me. The second it clicked shut, I heard movement inside, soft, shuffling sounds, like Jack was getting ready. I pressed my back against the wall in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to leave him alone, but I couldn't go against what he was saying. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. I stood there, trying to calm myself down, telling myself that maybe this was all just some weird psychological thing, something Jack had been dealing with his whole life, and I just didn't understand it. But then, I heard the noise again. That same low growl, now much louder, coming from inside the room. It didn't sound like it was coming from Jack. I couldn't help it. I had to know what was happening. I know I should have listened to him, but the fear of the unknown was eating me alive. Slowly, I crouched down and put my ear against the door, listening. I could hear Jack's breathing, shallow and uneven, and then I heard the sound of something someone else. It was a wet, sloping noise, like something was feeding. It wasn't Jack. It couldn't be. It sounded too unnatural, too wrong. My pulse was racing, and every instinct in my body was telling me to run, to get out of the house, to leave Jack behind. But I couldn't. I couldn't just leave him in there with whatever that thing was. I had to know. Very slowly, I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking as I gripped it. I didn't plan to open it all the way, just a crack, just enough to see what was going on. I turned the knob and opened the door, just a fraction of an inch, and that's when I saw it. The room was dimly lit by the lamp on the nightstand, casting long shadows across the floor. Jack was sitting at the table now, facing the wall, hunched over a bowl of something that looked like thick, dark sludge. But it wasn't just him in the room. Standing behind him, towering over him, was a figure, its outline barely visible in the shadows. Its limbs were long, unnaturally long, and its skin was pale, almost translucent. Its face, God, I don't even know if I can describe it. It was a mass of twisted features, eyes too wide, mouth too big, drooling as it hovered over Jack's shoulder, watching him eat. It wasn't looking at me. It was focused entirely on Jack, like it was waiting for him to finish, its bony fingers twitching with anticipation. I slammed the door shut before I could see any more. My heart was beating so fast I thought I was going to pass out. I backed away from the door, trying not to make a sound, trying not to draw attention to myself. That thing, whatever it wasn't human, and it was hungry. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that I needed to get the hell out of there. I didn't care about the answers anymore. I didn't care about the video. Jack had been hiding something far worse than I could have ever imagined. I heard movement from inside the room again, and that's when I bolted down the hallway, toward the front door, my hand shaking as I fumbled with the lock. I didn't stop to grab my phone, my wallet, nothing. I just ran out into the night. But as I reached the driveway, I heard Jack's voice call out from behind me, muffled through the walls of the house. "Nick, don't look back. Just go." I wish I could tell you that after Jack warned me not to look back, I did exactly that. I wish I could say I listened to him and ran far, far away. But I didn't. My brain was a mess, flooded with panic, guilt, and fear, and I just couldn't leave him behind. Something was terribly wrong, and if anyone could figure it out, it had to be me. So, after a few minutes of standing in the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest, I made the worst decision of my life. I turned back. The house was completely dark, except for the dim light spilling through Jack's window. It flickered like a dying candle, casting long, unsettling shadows across the yard. As I walked back toward the house, every fiber of my being was screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to leave. But I couldn't. Jack was my brother. I had to know what was happening to him. The front door was slightly ajar, just the way I'd left it. I pushed it open slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. Inside, the air felt heavier, thicker somehow, as if the whole house was suffocating under the weight of something unseen. I crept down the hallway toward Jack's room, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I stopped just outside Jack's door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. Then I heard it, that same wet, sloping sound from before, the one I'd heard through the door earlier, but now it was louder, more intense. It was the sound of something devouring, something feeding. My stomach churned, and I felt bile rise in the back of my throat. Whatever was in that room with Jack, it wasn't human. I hesitated, my hand frozen on the doorknob. I should have turned and run right then and there. I should have left the house and never looked back, but I couldn't. I needed to see what was happening. I needed to understand. I opened the door, just a crack, and peered inside. The room was dimly lit, the small lamp on Jack's bedside table casting strange shadows across the walls. Jack was sitting at the table, his back to me, hunched over that same bowl of dark, sludgy food. But he wasn't alone. That thing, the figure I'd seen before, it was standing behind him, its long, twisted limbs wrapped around Jack's shoulders, its face hovering just inches from his head. The creature's pale, translucent skin glistened in the dim light, and its eyes, those hollow, empty pits, were locked on Jack's bowl, watching every slow, deliberate bite he took. It was like Jack was in a trance, completely oblivious to the monster looming over him. He ate mechanically, like he was following some ritual, his movements stiff and unnatural. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was frozen in place, unable to tear my eyes away from the horrific scene in front of me. Then the thing moved. Its head twitched, and for the briefest of moments, those hollow, empty eyes shifted toward me. I slammed the door shut, my breath catching in my throat. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. It saw me. That thing saw me. I knew then that I had broken the rule. I had seen it, and there was no going back. I bolted down the hallway, barely able to think, my legs moving on pure instinct. I made it to the living room before I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like something was following me, stalking me. I didn't dare look back. I didn't have to. I knew it was there, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting for me to slip up. I reached the front door and threw it open, stumbling out into the cold night air. My mind was a blur of terror and confusion, my thoughts jumbled and incoherent. I needed to get away, as far away as possible, but as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still following me, that it would never stop. Jack had said there was a reason why no one could watch him eat, and now I understood. I had seen it, them, and now they were after me too. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station a few blocks away. I ducked inside, my chest heaving, my legs trembling with exhaustion. The cashier looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I needed to catch my breath, to think, to figure out what the hell was going on. But the worst part, I could still hear it. The sound of those footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing in the back of my mind. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I call the cops? Why didn't I try to get help? But honestly, what was I supposed to say? That my brother was being stalked by some twisted, skeletal monster? That I'd seen a creature from another world standing behind him while he ate? No one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. I don't know how long I sat in that gas station, trying to wrap my head around what I had just witnessed. The image of that creature, its bony fingers twitching with anticipation as it watched Jack eat, was burned into my mind. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and texted Jack. "I'm sorry. I saw it. What do I do?" I didn't expect a response, but a few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Jack's message was short, just one sentence, but it chilled me to my core. "You should have listened. Now they'll never stop." I'm wrapping this up because there's no easy way to say what comes next. That thing, or maybe those things, I don't even know anymore, followed me. They didn't stop, and I don't think they ever will. Everywhere I go, I feel it, like a shadow that's always just out of sight. Sometimes at night, I'll catch a glimpse of them in the corner of my eye, or hear that familiar wet, sloping sound in the darkness. I haven't gone back to Jack's house. I can't, but I know he's still out there, living with whatever this curse is, whatever this horror is. The deep web video, the reflection in the bowl, it all makes sense now. It wasn't just some random coincidence. It was a warning. I don't know what happens when you break the rule, when you watch them eat. But now, I'm part of it too. And no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, I know one thing for sure. They're still hungry. I ran, faster than I think I've ever run in my life. The cold night air stung my lungs, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back, didn't even think about what I was leaving behind. Jack's words kept ringing in my ears. Don't look back, just go. I should have listened. I should have kept running and never looked back. But I didn't. After what felt like hours, I finally stopped at a gas station a few blocks away. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. I was drenched in sweat, my mind racing. What the hell had I just seen? That thing in Jack's room. It wasn't something from this world. I knew that much. I was panicking, but I knew I had to get my head straight. I needed to think, needed to figure out what to do next. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I tried to dial Jack's number. My hands were slick with sweat, and I nearly dropped the phone twice before I managed to get the call through. It rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I couldn't just leave him there with that thing, could I? My instinct screamed at me to get far away, but the guilt was worse. Jack was my brother, and whatever had been haunting him, whatever had taken hold of him, was still in that house. I wasn't sure if he was still alive, or if he was already gone, but I couldn't just abandon him. I stood there, the night air heavy and oppressive, trying to decide what to do. My brain was a mess. I didn't know what was real anymore. Was it all in my head? Could it be some kind of hallucination? Deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. Then, I heard it. A noise. Faint at first, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. It wasn't coming from the street, though. It wasn't the sound of passing cars or distant voices. It was a low, wet, gurgling sound, like something struggling to breathe. I turned around slowly, my heart thudding in my chest, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the gas station lot, standing just outside the reach of the flickering lights, was a figure. It was tall, hunched over, its limbs long and twisted in ways that made my stomach churn. Its skin was pale, almost gray, and its face, or what I assumed was its face, was hidden in the shadows. It was the same thing I'd seen in Jack's room. It had followed me. I felt like I was going to throw up. My whole body went cold, and my legs felt like they were going to give out beneath me. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me, waiting. I couldn't take my eyes off it. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my feet were glued to the spot. That gurgling noise, it was louder now, like it was choking on something, struggling to breathe. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was hungry. Then, slowly, it took a step forward. That's when I snapped out of it. My body finally reacted, and I bolted into the gas station, the door slamming shut behind me. The cashier looked up, startled, but I couldn't focus on him. My mind was spinning, heart racing. I ran to the back of the store, hiding behind the aisles, trying to catch my breath. My whole body was trembling. I pulled out my phone and texted Jack. What the hell is going on? It followed me. What do I do? I didn't expect a reply, not after what I had seen back at the house. But my phone buzzed a few seconds later, and my heart jumped into my throat. It was Jack. The text was short, almost too short to make sense of. You broke the rule. You can't look at them. Not now. Not ever. My hand started shaking as I read the words. It wasn't just Jack who had to follow that rule. It was me now too. I'd seen them, whatever they were. And now, they were after me. I didn't have time to process the message because at that moment, I heard the door to the gas station creak open. Slowly, painfully slow, I peered around the corner of the aisle. It was there. That thing, the same one I'd seen outside, the same one from Jack's room, was inside the gas station now, standing near the door. It was hunched over, its head nearly brushing the ceiling, its limbs long and skeletal, its joints bending at unnatural angles, and its face. God, its face was worse up close. The skin was pulled tight, and its eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to suck in all the light around them. The cashier didn't even notice. He didn't react. It was like the thing wasn't even there, but it saw me. Its head twitched unnaturally, its hollow eyes locked on mine. The air felt thick, like I was trying to breathe through a wet cloth. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I couldn't look at it for long. That's what Jack's text meant. I had to stop looking. I had to get out. I turned and ran faster than I thought was possible, knocking over shelves and displays as I bolted toward the back exit. I didn't care about anything else. I just needed to get away. I burst through the back door into the alley behind the gas station. The cold air hit me like a slap to the face, and I stumbled, barely managing to stay on my feet. I could still hear that thing behind me, its movements slow but deliberate. It wasn't in any hurry. It knew it didn't need to be. I don't remember much after that. My mind was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I ran and ran, not stopping until my legs gave out beneath me. When I finally looked up, I was miles away from the gas station in some deserted part of town. For a moment, I thought I was safe, but then my phone buzzed again. It was another message from Jack. They won't stop until you stop looking. Get somewhere safe. Don't watch them eat. That was the last message I ever got from Jack. It's been a few weeks now, and I still don't know where Jack is. I went back to the house the next morning, but he was gone. The room was empty, no sign of him or the thing I saw that night. But I can feel it. I know it's still watching me, waiting for me to slip up. I've started seeing them in other places too, in reflections, in the corner of my eye when I'm walking home, late at night. They're always just out of reach, just beyond the edge of my vision. I haven't broken the rule again. I haven't watched, but I know they're still there, and they're hungry. I was hired to analyze a dark web video of an alien ritual. Now I'm part of the ritual. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for a while and never thought I'd have a story worth sharing. I'm just an average guy, you know, not into the whole supernatural thing, but I gotta get this off my chest because things are getting weird, real weird, and I don't know what to do. So, here it goes. It all started 2 months ago. I work in cybersecurity, and I've got some experience dealing with sketchy stuff on the internet. Nothing crazy, Just typical dark web stuff. Shady forums, illegal cells, the occasional virus or ransomware case. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I'm pretty damn good at it. One day, I got an email from a guy calling himself Mr. H. The email subject was simple: job offer. Normally, I'd delete something like that, because who the hell sends out mysterious job offers through email, right? But this guy knew his stuff. He referenced some of my past work, stuff that wasn't even public. He mentioned a few anonymous handles I'd used on different forums, making it clear he had done his homework. Curiosity got the better of me, and I replied. Within minutes, I got a response with a link to a private chat room. That should have been the first red flag. But when you're working in cybersecurity, you're used to encrypted chats, hidden links, and sketchy communications. So, I went for it. Inside the chat, Mr. H got right to the point. He wanted me to analyze a video he found on the dark web. Not just any video. He described it as disturbing content and potentially non-human. I laughed a little at that, thinking it was probably some creepy ARG, alternate reality game, or just another shock video. But then he said the magic words, $10,000 for 2 days of work. 10 grand for 2 days. I was in. He sent me a link to a Tor site and told me to download the video. I knew what I was doing, but I still took precautions, ran it through a virtual machine, checked for any hidden malware or trackers. It was clean, but it was huge, like 4 gigabytes huge for a video file. That's bigger than most movies. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I just assumed it was raw footage or something. So I started the download and got ready to analyze it. Here's the thing. When you spend as much time as I do on the internet, you see some messed up stuff. You become numb to it, almost. But the second I opened that file, something felt off. The thumbnail alone made my skin crawl. It was dark and grainy, like it had been shot on an old camcorder. The image was just a group of people standing in a circle in the middle of a forest, facing a tall figure I couldn't make out. I don't know why, but I hesitated before pressing play. I've never done that before. Normally, I'd just hit play and get it over with. But there was something about that thumbnail that made me feel like I was about to see something I wasn't supposed to. Something dangerous. Eventually, curiosity won out, and I hit play. The screen flickered, and the video began. It started with static, like the kind you'd see on old VHS tapes when they're damaged. The audio was all garbled too, full of hissing and whispers. The camera was shaky, like someone was walking through the woods at night. You could hear twigs snapping and the faint sound of wind, but no voices. Not at first, anyway. After about a minute, the camera reached a clearing, and that's when I saw them. A group of maybe 10 or 12 people, all standing in a perfect circle, wearing long dark robes with strange symbols I couldn't quite make out. They weren't moving. They weren't even swaying. Just standing there, dead still. In the center of the circle was a figure, tall, lanky, and way too thin to be human. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its head, its head was wrong. It was elongated, kind of like how you'd imagine an alien, but the proportions were just off. There were no eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin. The thing was holding something in its hand, a long twisted object that looked like a staff or a scepter. I should have turned the video off right there, but I didn't. I kept watching. The people in the circle started chanting, their voices low and guttural. The camera zoomed in on the figure in the center. It slowly raised its scepter, and the chanting grew louder. There was something hypnotic about it, like I couldn't pull myself away. My eyes felt glued to the screen. And then, the static hit again. The whole video glitched for a few seconds, and when it came back, the figure was gone. The people in the circle were still there, but they were different. Their faces were twisted, contorted in silent screams, and in the center of the circle, there was a hole, a black, empty void that looked like it went on forever. At that point, I shut the video off. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking. I don't know why, but I felt like I was being watched, like something was in the room with me, even though I knew I was alone. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a video, just pixels on a screen, but I couldn't shake the feeling. And that's when I got another message from Mr. H. It simply read, "Watch it to the end." My hands hovered over the keyboard, staring at that message. Watch it to the end. How did he know I stopped the video? There was no way he could have known unless he was somehow watching me. I pushed that thought away, telling myself I was being paranoid. Still, I felt this tightening in my chest, like I was suffocating under the weight of something unseen. I leaned back in my chair, just sitting there for a few minutes, trying to collect myself. Part of me wanted to delete the video, close everything down, and pretend none of this ever happened. But $10,000 was still $10,000, and it's not like I hadn't seen weird stuff before, right? So, against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I reopened the video. The screen flickered to life again, but something was off. The video wasn't where I'd left it. It had jumped forward. Now, the camera was zoomed in on the circle again, but the people weren't standing still anymore. They were moving, slow, deliberate movements, like they were performing some kind of ritual dance. The tall figure was gone, but the hole in the ground was still there, darker than before, almost pulsing. I rewound the video, trying to find the exact spot where I'd left off, but every time I did, the video would glitch, flicker, and jump back to the same scene. No matter what I tried, I couldn't rewind past that point. So, I kept watching. The people circled the hole, their movements getting faster and more erratic. The audio was all distorted, like a low hum mixed with static, and over it, I thought I could hear whispers, not just from the video, in my room. It was like they were seeping through the speakers, crawling into my ears. I turned the volume down, but the whispers didn't stop. They got louder, clearer, and I swear to you, I could make out words. It was like they were speaking directly to me. "Join us. Come closer. We see you." My skin crawled. I glanced around the room, feeling that same oppressive presence from before. The air felt thicker, like it was pressing down on me. My heart was racing again, and I had this sudden urge to turn off the video and never look at it again. But I couldn't. Something was compelling me to keep watching, like the video had hooked itself into my brain. The camera zoomed in even closer to the hole. I couldn't see the bottom, just endless darkness. And then, something moved in the shadows. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. Something was definitely moving down there. A slithering, shifting mass, just out of focus, like it was trying to claw its way out of the hole. That's when the screen cut to black. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the monitor, half relieved that it was over. But the timer on the video was still ticking. The file wasn't finished. There was still about 5 minutes left. My fingers hovered over the keyboard again. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Everything in me was telling me to stop, to close the video and walk away. But I hit play. The screen stayed black for a moment, then flickered back to life. The camera was closer now, inside the circle. The people were no longer moving. They were on the ground, face down, their robes stained dark. The hum from before was louder, but more than that, there was this sound, like wet, labored breathing. The camera panned slowly across the bodies, then down to the hole, and something was crawling out of it. I couldn't see it clearly, just flashes of pale limbs and a twisting, elongated form. It didn't have a face, just smooth skin stretched tight over its skull. It moved in this jerky, unnatural way, like it wasn't used to its own body. And then it did something that still haunts me to this day. It looked at the camera. It had no eyes, no features, but somehow I knew it was looking directly at me. I felt this cold wave wash over me, like my entire body had been plunged into ice water. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, completely paralyzed by fear. And then the whispers came back, louder this time, overlapping with the hum and the breathing. "We see you. You are part of this now. You cannot escape." The thing in the video crawled closer to the camera, its body twitching and contorting in impossible ways. I wanted to turn it off. I wanted to shut the whole thing down, but my hands wouldn't move. It was like the thing had taken control of me, pulling me deeper into its nightmare. I felt like if I blinked or looked away for even a second, it would reach through the screen and pull me in with it. And then the screen glitched again. The thing was gone, and the camera was back on the hole. The bodies around it had started to disappear. Not like they were being dragged away, more like they were dissolving into the ground, sinking into the darkness below. The camera zoomed in one last time on the hole. The whispers were deafening now, the sound vibrating through my skull. I felt like I was about to pass out, but just before the video ended, something flashed on the screen. Just for a second, but I caught it. It was a symbol, the same symbol that had been on the robes of the people in the circle. And then the video stopped. I slammed the laptop shut and sat there in the dark, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. It was just a video, right? Some kind of twisted art project or prank. But it didn't feel like that. It felt real. Too real. Before I could even catch my breath, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from an unknown number. The message simply said, "Now it begins." I stared at my phone for a solid minute, my mind blank, trying to process that text. Now it begins. My heart was still racing from the video. But this was something else. How did this person know I had finished watching the video? And more importantly, what exactly was beginning? My immediate reaction was to block the number. I was done with this. I told myself I'd finish the job, send a report to Mr. H, collect the money, and never think about it again. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Things had already crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I sat there for a while, staring at my phone, then back at the laptop. My apartment felt different, like the walls were closing in, the air heavier, almost suffocating. I needed to get out, clear my head. So I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a walk, hoping a change of scenery would help me think straight. It was late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m. The streets were empty, just the sound of my footsteps echoing off the pavement. Normally, walking helped calm my nerves, but tonight was different. No matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Not by someone, but something. Every shadow seemed darker. Every corner felt like it was hiding something, watching, waiting. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but of course, there was nothing, just empty streets. But that didn't stop the feeling. It only grew stronger. About 10 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed again. I fumbled it out of my pocket, half expecting it to be another message from that same unknown number. But it wasn't a text. It was a picture. I opened it and instantly stopped in my tracks. It was a photo of me, right there, in the exact spot I was standing, looking at my phone. It had been taken just seconds earlier, but the angle was all wrong, like it had been shot from above, looking down at me from some impossible height. I looked around, panicked, my heart pounding harder than ever. There was no one around, no buildings tall enough nearby, no windows or cameras. Just me, alone in the middle of the street. Another message followed. "We're watching." I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to run, but where was I going to go? I was alone, completely exposed. Every rational part of my brain told me to call the police, but what was I going to say? Someone's watching me through a video? It sounded insane. Before I could decide on my next move, another text came through. "Return to the video." That was it. I was done. I turned around and started walking back to my apartment, my mind racing, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. The logical part of me still clung to the idea that this was some elaborate prank or a hacker trying to mess with me. But the deeper, darker part of me, the part that had felt those whispers crawling into my head, knew better. When I got back to my apartment, I double-checked the locks and made sure the windows were shut tight. I paced around for a while, trying to calm down, but I knew what I had to do. I didn't want to, but there was no avoiding it. I sat back down at my desk, opened the laptop, and pulled up the video again. The thumbnail had changed. It wasn't the grainy circle of robed figures anymore. It was a close-up of that hole. Just blackness, as if the video was trying to pull me in. I felt sick to my stomach, but I clicked it anyway. The video started from the beginning this time. No glitches, no skipping ahead. But something was different. The figures in the circle weren't just standing still anymore. They were swaying slightly, their heads tilted towards the ground as if they were waiting for something. The whispers were louder, more distinct, almost like they were clearer this time. And then I noticed something that chilled me to the bone. One of the figures in the circle was wearing a jacket. My jacket. It was unmistakable. The same color, the same faded logo on the back. I leaned closer to the screen, my mind spinning. That wasn't there before. I'd watched the video a dozen times. That figure wasn't there before. Then the camera panned again, and I saw it, my own face. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It was me, standing there in the circle, my face blank, eyes glazed over, swaying with the others. The figure in the video was wearing my clothes, had my face, but it wasn't me. It couldn't be. And then, slowly, the camera zoomed in on my face. It held there for what felt like hours, but it was only seconds. My eyes, those dead, empty eyes, seemed to look right through the screen, right into me. That's when the whispers returned, louder and clearer than ever. "You are part of the ritual now." I slammed the laptop shut, my whole body shaking. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. I stumbled back, almost tripping over my chair, gasping for air. I felt like I was being suffocated, trapped in my own home, with something that wasn't supposed to exist. Then my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I didn't even want to touch it, but my hand moved on its own, like I was no longer in control of my body. I picked it up and saw the notification. It was a video file. The file name was just my name, nothing else. Trembling, I tapped it open. It was a live feed of me, sitting at my desk, staring at my phone, exactly like I was right then. The camera was angled from somewhere above, showing my entire apartment. There was no way someone could have set up a camera in here. I hadn't left the place long enough for that. No one had been inside. But as I watched the video, something moved behind me. In the live feed, a figure, tall, lanky, and impossibly thin, stepped into the frame, standing in the far corner of my room. I spun around, eyes wide, but the room was empty. My heart pounded in my chest, my skin crawling with fear. I looked back at the phone. The figure was still there, closer now, standing right behind where I should have been sitting, its head tilted slightly, like it was watching me, waiting. Then the whispers came through my phone. "You can't run. The ritual has begun." I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that live feed on my phone, my body frozen in place. The figure in the video, that impossibly tall, faceless thing, was just standing behind where I should have been. I knew I wasn't seeing things, but every time I turned around, the room was empty. The whispers had faded, but the suffocating presence hadn't. It was still there, pressing down on me like a physical weight, like something was just waiting for me to slip up. My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't want to look. My mind was screaming at me to throw the phone across the room, to smash the laptop, to leave this place and never come back. But I couldn't move. I felt like I was being puppeteered, forced to check my phone, forced to follow along with whatever twisted game I'd stumbled into. Another message. Just 2 words. It's time. The screen on my phone flickered. The live feed glitched for a moment. Then the camera angle changed. It wasn't just showing me anymore. The figure in the video, the thing, was now walking toward the screen, toward me. Each step it took sent a wave of dread crashing over me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I watched as its long, thin arm reached out toward the camera, toward the back of my head in the video. Then the feed went black. I dropped my phone. My whole body was shaking now, sweat dripping down my forehead. I felt like I was about to be sick, my stomach twisting in knots. I didn't want to be in that room anymore. Something was coming, something terrible. And then I heard it. A knock at the door. I stared at the door, heart pounding so hard, I thought my chest might explode. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, 3 heavy thuds. It wasn't possible. I lived alone, in a locked building, on the 4th floor. There was no way anyone could just show up like that in the middle of the night. But there it was, clear as day. Someone, or something, was on the other side. Another knock, louder this time. I backed up toward the far wall, trying to put as much distance between me and the door as possible. I wasn't going to answer it. No way. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. Whatever was out there wasn't going to wait for me to let it in. It was already coming. The knocking stopped, replaced by a low creak, as the door slowly began to open. I froze, my eyes locked on the door as it swung inward, revealing nothing but the darkness of the hallway beyond. For a brief, terrifying moment, I thought maybe it had left. Maybe this was all some sick hallucination, a nightmare I'd wake up from at any second. But then I saw it, a shadow, long and stretched, creeping into my apartment like it was alive. I couldn't see the figure attached to it, but I knew it was there. I could feel it, the same suffocating presence I'd felt ever since I watched that damn video. It was here, in my home, coming for me. I backed into the corner, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what to do. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The shadow moved slowly across the floor, snaking toward me, stretching longer and darker as it reached the far wall. Then, from the darkness of the open door, a voice whispered, soft and clear, "It's your turn." I shut my eyes, pressing my back against the wall, trying to block out the sound. But it was everywhere now, in the air, in my mind, crawling under my skin. "You're part of it now. You've always been part of it." My head was spinning, my thoughts a chaotic mess. The symbols from the video, the whispers, the thing that had crawled out of the hole. It was all connected. Somehow, I'd become part of this twisted ritual, and I didn't even know how or why. I opened my eyes, and the figure was there. It was standing right in front of me, towering over me, its faceless head inches from mine. Its limbs were long and unnatural, bending in ways they shouldn't, its skin pale and smooth like porcelain. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare into the empty space where its eyes should have been. And then it raised its hand, slowly, deliberately, and touched my forehead with one long, bony finger. The moment it made contact, my entire body went cold. It wasn't just fear. It was like something was draining the life out of me, pulling me down into that endless black hole I'd seen in the video. My vision blurred, my limbs went numb, and I felt myself slipping away. But before I lost consciousness, I heard one last whisper, louder than all the others, echoing inside my skull. "The ritual is complete." I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing again. At first, I thought it had all been a dream, a vivid, horrifying nightmare. But as I sat up and looked around, I realized I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was outside, in the woods. It was still dark, the trees towering over me, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was cold, damp, and the smell of wet earth filled my lungs. My clothes were soaked, like I'd been lying in the dirt for hours. I scrambled to my feet, panic rising in my chest. How the hell had I gotten here? The last thing I remembered was that figure in my apartment, touching my forehead, and then nothing. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands, hoping for some kind of answer, some explanation for what was happening. It was a video file. I hesitated for a moment, but I knew I had no choice. I tapped the file, and the video began to play. It was me, standing in the middle of a clearing, surrounded by a circle of people in dark robes, the same robes I had seen in the video. My face was blank, expressionless, my eyes dull and lifeless. The camera panned around, showing the same twisted, unnatural figure I had seen before, standing in the center of the circle, holding its staff. I was part of the ritual now. The camera zoomed in on my face, just like it had done with those other people. But this time, I wasn't just a passive viewer. I was in it. And as I watched, I saw my mouth begin to move. I started chanting along with the others, my voice low and guttural, in a language I didn't understand. Then the camera panned back, revealing the hole. The same dark, endless void that had haunted me since I first saw it. And one by one, the people around me began to sink into it, their bodies dissolving into the blackness, until it was just me and the figure left standing. I turned to the camera, to myself, and for the first time, I smiled. Then the screen went black, and my phone buzzed with one final message. Welcome home. I dropped the phone, my heart racing, my mind spinning. I was stuck. There was no escaping this now. I had become part of the ritual, just like the others. The video, the whispers, the shadow. It had all been leading to this. I looked around the woods, but there was no way out. I was trapped.